Chapter 10. The following day, the three rangers, accompanied by Horace and Fingal, were on the road, headed for Castle Aralouen. The others had watched with broad grins as Halt self-consciously kissed his new wife goodbye. Lady Pauline took their separation philosophically. When she had accepted Halt's proposal, she had known that their life together would be interrupted by urgent missions and sudden disappearances. Still, she thought wryly, it might have been nice if this particular departure had been a little less sudden, a little less urgent. Alice stood beside her, waving as the five mounted figures cantered down the winding road that led away from Castle Redmont. Pauline glanced sideways at her protege, and couldn't resist the tiniest vestige of a smile at Alice's face. "Why so glum?" she asked innocently. Alice looked up at her, grimacing. "He's going off with her again," the young girl said. No need for Pauline to ask who she might mean. Alice and Will had been seeing a lot of each other in the past year, she knew. They had become very close, and now it obviously bothered Alice that Will was setting out on a mission with Cassandra once more. Alice knew that the ranger's apprentice and the princess shared a special relationship. She wasn't sure how special it might be. "I've been trying to work a reason for me to go along with them," she added, a little despondently. "To keep an eye on your investment?" Alice nodded. "Exactly. I thought I could volunteer to go as a companion to her, and as a diplomatic advisor. I'm good at negotiations, you know." "That's true," Pauline considered the idea. "In fact, it might have been worth suggesting. I would have supported the idea. Why didn't you?" Alice looked away from her now, watching a small group gradually dwindling from sight. Or rather, Pauline surmised, she was watching one member of the small group. "Two reasons. I decided that Will and Halt and the others didn't need the responsibilities of another female to look after. If I were there, it would mean that much less protection for Cassandra, and she is the crown princess, after all." "And the other reason?" Pauline prompted her. Alice grinned ruefully. "I thought I might succumb to the temptation of hitting her over the head with an oar," she said, "which would not have been a good career move." Pauline grinned at her. "And she is the crown princess, after all," she parroted. The riders had disappeared into the fringes of the forest. Pauline slipped her arm inside of Alice's and led her away from the battlements where they had been standing. "Don't worry too much about it," she said. "Admittedly, there is a strong bond between Will and the princess. That's inevitable, after all they've been through." Her voice indicated that there was more to be said. It was Alice's turn to prompt. "But," she said, "but Will made a choice several years ago when he opted to remain a ranger. He knows that a ranger's life won't mix with life at the court. A princess and a ranger just aren't a good match. And it would be twice as difficult when Cassandra eventually becomes queen." Whereas, Alice said, "There's a lot to be said for rangers and couriers marrying." Lady Pauline allowed herself a low smile. "Oh, indeed. Of course, the courier has to accept that the ranger will often be called away on urgent missions. And he'd better accept that I'll have missions of my own," said Alice, abandoning the pretense of talking in the third person. Pauline patted her arm gently. "That's my girl," she said. "Why can't I go with the others?" Cassandra asked, for perhaps the 20th time. She was in the rooms that had been set aside for her use at Redmont, hastily cramming her clothes into her leather traveling valises. Duncan raised an eyebrow at the cavalier treatment of the fine silks and satins she was handling. "Perhaps you should let your staff attend to that," he suggested, seeing that she would never get the lids closed on the jumble of gowns, cloaks, overdresses, petticoats, and scarves that were reared up out of the case. Cassandra made an impatient gesture. "That's my point. They would have packed all this up. I could have ridden ahead with Will and Horace, and deprived me of the last few days in your company," Duncan said gently. She instantly regretted her impatience. He was worried about sending her to Arita, she knew. He had made no pretense that he wasn't, and she knew that he would worry from the moment that she left until the moment she returned, safe and sound. And, as she thought, she realized that she would miss him. She would miss his calm, confident presence while she was away, and his warmth. They might squabble from time to time, but that didn't change the fact that they loved each other deeply. She stepped toward her father and put her arms around him gently, caressing his neck, drawing him to her. "Sorry, Dad," she said softly. "I'd like a few days with you, too." "The others have to get the ship ready," he reminded her. "Riding back with me won't hold you up in the long run." He patted her shoulder. He could feel the pressure building in his eyes as tears started to form. He would miss her. He would worry about her. Above all, he knew, he would be proud of her courage, her sense of duty, her spirit. "You'll make a good queen," he said. Fingal lay groaning on the turf. His thighs were sheer agony. His buttocks ached. His calf muscles were on fire. Now, after he'd tumbled off the small pony he was riding and thudded heavily to the turf on the point of his shoulder, the shoulder was hurt too. He concentrated on trying to find one part of his body that wasn't a giant source of pain and failed miserably. He opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the face of the elderly pony that he had been riding as it peered down at him. "Now what made you do a strange thing like that?" the creature seemed to be asking. Gradually, as Fingal's focus widened, he became aware that there were other eyes staring at him. 3 ranger horses, for a start, and above them, 3 rangers, all with the same puzzled expression. Only Horace and his larger horse looked vaguely sympathetic. "You know, it beats me," Halt said, "how these people can balance on the deck of a ship that's going up and down and side to side 3 or 4 meters at a time, yet put them on a placid old pony and that's gentle as a rocking horse, and they're instantly trying to get off again." "I wasn't trying to get off," Fingal told him. He slowly rolled over and rose to his knees. His muscles shrieked in protest. "Oh, by the great wallowing blue whale, why does everything hurt?" he said. Then he continued in his original thought. "That brute of a horse bucked me off." "Bucked you off," said Gillen, hiding a grin. "Did anyone see Plod here do any bucking?" Will and Halt shook their heads. To his discredit, Halt was enjoying this a little too much. During the Temanjai invasion, he had been aboard a wolf ship sent to verify Slagor's treachery. Fingal had been one of the crew members most amused by the reaction of Halt's stomach to the motions of the sea. Halt had a long memory, Will had learned. "He bucked, I tell you," Fingal insisted, standing more or less upright and groaning again. "He couldn't quite straighten at the waist. I felt a distinct movement." "He turned to the left," Gillen told him. "Suddenly," Fingal insisted. "Plod never did anything suddenly in his life," Halt said. "At least, not in the past 15 years of it." "That's why we call him Plod," Will put in helpfully. Fingal glared at him. "That's not what I call him," he said venomously, and the 3 ragers exchanged amused looks. "Well, yes, I'll admit we've heard some colorful language this morning," Gillen said. He turned to Halt. "Who is this Gorlog character, by the way? And does he really have horns and teeth as long shaggy hair?" "He's a very useful person," Halt told him. "You can invoke him by all those different features. He's the very soul of variety. One never gets bored with Orlog around." Fingal, during this breezy interchange, was eyeing the battle axe hanging from Plod's saddlebow. He wasn't sure if he'd rather use it on the pony or the 3 rangers who were enjoying his predicament so thoroughly. Horace decided it had gone far enough. He slipped down from Kicker's saddle and caught Plod's trailing bridle, leading him toward the aching Scandian. "You 3 don't have a lot of sympathy, do you?" he asked. The 3 rangers exchanged glances again, smiling at each other. "Not really," Gillen agreed cheerfully. Horace dismissed them with a wave of his hand and turned to Fingal. Come on, I'll give you a boost." He out his hands, forming a stirrup to help Fingal into the saddle. The Scandian backed away, holding his aching back with one hand. "I'll walk," he said. "You can't walk all the way to Heirloom," Horace said, reasonably. "Now come on. The best thing you can do when you've fallen is get back in the saddle again." He looked at the three rangers. "Am I right?" Three cowled heads nodded. They looked like green and gray vultures, Horace thought. "Get on again?" Fingal asked. "On that?" Horace nodded encouragingly. "You're telling me that the best thing I can do, after this fiend from hell launched me and spun and jumped and broke every second bone in my body, is to get back on and give him another chance at me? That's right. Come on, I'll give you a boost up." Painfully, Fingal limped forward, raising his right foot and placing it in Horace's cupped hands. The next part, the sudden convulsive leap upward, involved his thoroughly abused major muscle groups. Was going to hurt like the very devil, he knew. He looked into Horace's eyes, honest, encouraging, free of guile. "And I thought you were my friend," he said bitterly.